Hi everybody, welcome back to part 15 of the Revell 144 scale Flower Class build. In this part I'm going to build the weapons for the platforms that we've been building over the last couple of episodes. So we've got a 4-inch mounting the main gun on the ship that fits on the front platform here. We've got a 2-pounder pom-pom that goes on the bandstand that we built in the last episode in part 14. And I'm also going to catch up with the bridge work and finish the 2 oerlikons that fit onto the bridge wings. The guns themselves are mainly built from Pontos etched brass and 1 or 2 turned brass parts, particularly for the barrels. But there are also 1 or 2 parts from the Revell kit that we need to cut out and amend ready for the Pontos parts. So we'll start off with the 2-pounder pom-pom that goes on the bandstand at the back here. Follow that up with the 2 oerlikons, and then finally I'll build the 4-inch mounting the main gun on the ship. So let's bring the camera over and get started with these guns. The first thing I'm going to do this week is to build the 2-pounder gun, and this fits onto the bandstand that I built in the previous episode. So we're just carrying on really straight from there. As you can see, there's a lot of Pontos etched brass in this assembly, and also a turned brass barrel as well. So it should be nice when it's finished, certainly a lot better than the Revell bare plastic parts. And we only use 2 of those parts in this assembly. So we'll get started with this one and see how it goes together. These are the Revell pieces that we need. The first thing to do is to remove the barrel. We don't need that. Just clean the plastic up a little bit. There's quite a lot of flash on this part. It's just one of the signs of the quality of the Revell kit. Some of the parts are quite roughly moulded, if you like, and you've got to pay some attention to getting them sorted out. This is the base plate, and obviously we don't need these 2 pieces on the corner. These are the pair of tread plates, I think. They can come off altogether. You can see a bit close up now the Revell parts all prepared. Just a couple of minutes work to do that. There's nothing to it really. The plastic breech has to have the mounting hole opened up a little bit with a 0.7mm drill. This is one of those assemblies where I'm going to get a couple of chances at it because this is a spare fret. If you've been following the build, you'll know that I first of all received a damaged Pontos set. So the replacement frets, this is one of them. So it's quite handy for some of these fine details. You get a second chance if you mess one up. The first assembly job I'm going to do is just to put the base plate on. These very fine wings fold up. I think they're probably to support the shield at the front, but I'm going to leave them down at the moment. If I bend them, I'm probably likely to break them, so I'm going to leave them in position. The trunnions fold on themselves. I'll just put a bit of solder in these just to hold them together. Just be careful here not to get the little mounting holes blocked up. That'll make it difficult to fit other parts later on in the assembly, so just a bit of care with that, not too much flux. You could glue these together. It's not absolutely necessary to solder them. I just do that because it's just a bit stronger. So with the shield, I'm going to try and solder the trunnions to the shield before I fold it up. Hopefully that'll give us a good strong assembly. So that's the first one. See if we can get the second one in now. So they're nice and solid. Well, reasonably, they'll be better than glue anyway. The shield now bends up a little bit, or bends back rather. And we can now bend this front section up. Originally I thought this just folded straight back and cemented onto the front of the shield, but it doesn't. It forms a bit of an angle. So it sits in that sort of position. Just give that a gentle clean. Just gets rid of the bits of flux and solder that we don't want. So that's the first step. We've got a solid construction there to build the rest of the gun on. The trunnions and the shield in the correct place. I'm not going to glue it to this base plate yet. I want to see what else we've got to do. There's quite a lot of extra detail now to fit to this. So with that assembly in place, we can fit these brass parts now. This is the barrel and the flash suppressor on the end of the barrel. First of all, I just want to drill out the Revell plastic breech just to accept the barrel. Just a 0.5mm drill will do that. Make sure the barrel's straight. This tiny piece of brass, which you can barely see, goes onto the end of the barrel and it just offsets the flash suppressor. So we'll see if we can get that on. It's microscopic really. See if that stays on. I'm not sure it will. The flash suppressor goes on the end of that. This actually might hold that previous piece of etched brass in place a bit better. That's an extremely fiddly piece of assembly, but it's so much better than the Revell plastic part. The difficulty is just getting it nice and straight and all lined up so that the barrel's not kinked. That looks nice. We'll get it onto the trunnion now. And to do that, Pontos give us this brass pivot which goes through the hole that we drilled. And we now have to get that through onto the mounting. I might just have to take a little bit off the pivot. It's probably just a little bit too wide, the pin's on the end, so I'll just cut a little piece off. Just have to open the trunnions up a little bit just to ease this into position. So after a little bit of pushing and shoving, I've managed to get the breech and the gun into the cradle. It's a very tight fit. Those pivots are very tight in the holes on the side of the trunnions, so it does take quite a bit of effort to get them in. This top pivot here is where the sights fit. We'll do those in a while, but before that I want to get the training gear on the side. So on the left hand side we've got the elevation wheel with this pivot again. This fits onto the side, but it sandwiches this piece. So the pivot goes onto the end. Fit the pivot on like that. Very satisfying snap when that happens. On the other side of the gun we have the traversing gear or wheel. So we have this small bracket to fold first, and at the bottom we've also got another pivot which strangely enough needs to be folded back on itself. I'm not quite sure the point of that really. It's one of Pontos's habits of having you fold tiny little parts like that. You can barely see it on my finger. This is the axle that joins the two brackets together. So we'll try and just assemble this off the gun, and hopefully once the axle and the two brackets are together we can then just fit them to the side of the gun. Next we've got the magazine to build. This is the ammunition belt with the rounds on it, or at least the ones that you can see through the openings in the ammunition box. I'll glue these in at the end once I've painted the ammunition box, because obviously I'll keep the brass shells. The last step with this gun is to fit the sights, which are often the very most difficult part of a small gun like this to put together. The pieces of brass are very small and very delicate, so we've got to be careful with them. With these gun sights, the main thing I suppose is to get them lined up, but to get them in parallel with the direction of the barrel. They did move in conjunction with the barrel, so these Pontos sights are very delicate. They have 2 bends in them, 3 bends in them. The first one is at the back where it attaches to the trunnion, and then we have the sighting ring at the back which folds up, and the sight at the front which also folds up. So we end up with something looking like that, if you can see it. I can barely see it. The trick is to get it onto the side of the trunnion now. So just apply a bit of, just dip that in some thin super glue. I'm just going to let that set for a while before I reposition it. It's not straight just at the moment, but there's a chance that I'll just pull it off again if the glue's not dry. It should be getting there now. And just those few seconds just allowed the glue to grip. But it's still not quite cured, so there's enough movement to allow us to reposition the sight. Another little trick that I sometimes use on very fine parts like this is once they're attached, just allow them to hang under gravity in the direction that you want, just until the glue sets. And if needs be, you can just apply a little bit more just to lock the part at the top. So just let the part hang until the glue's set. The right hand sight has a shield underneath it as well, so that's quite an awkward part to fit. I'm going to cheat a little bit and just glue that to the top of the shield below, because the attachment point on the actual sight is just not going to hold anything. If you put enough glue on for it to attach to the sight, it's just going to be a big blob, so that's a neater result doing it like that. So the sight shield is just resting on the ammunition box shield, which is just below it, and then we've got the main shield below that. So from the front you can see the 3 shields, one above the other. So that's the 2-pounder done, apart from the ammunition belt, which, as I said, I'll fit after painting. So that's the first of the weapons all done. Just needs priming now, and we'll paint them all together at the end. Just on that last shot, I noticed that I'd got this part in the wrong position, this arm, which goes just next to the left-hand sight, and it's actually part of the mechanism for the elevation of the gun. So it fits on the pivot at the end of this top pivot and goes down into the mechanism on the left-hand trunnion down there. I thought it was something to do with the sight and had it sticking straight forward in line with the barrel of the gun, so that's wrong. You can just see there how that arm angles downwards towards the side trunnion. So that's the correct position for that part. So that's the 2-pounder in the bandstand that I built in the last episode. Next we'll build the 2 oerlikon guns. These are entirely etched brass and replace the Revell parts. We'll probably build these from the base upwards, so the first job is to do the pedestals. Pontos, as you can see, have turned these parts with the pedestal and the oerlikon barrel in one turning, so we just need to snap those off, and straight away I'll glue the pedestal onto the base at the bottom. These are the actual cradles for the gun, so they fold like that, and then the two shield supports bend outwards, so we end up with an assembly something like that. So those are the two pedestals and mountings. This is the breech, I suppose, of the gun. The sights, as you can see, have to be folded sideways like that. Just get some glue onto the mounting there and drop the gun into position. Got to be very careful with these sights. If they get bent more than a couple of times, they'll just snap off, and they'll be very difficult to repair once that's happened. I might just elevate one of these just for a bit of variety. So I'll just pop this up in its cradle a little bit. Next we have a small control wheel. I think this is probably the elevation control. Just goes on the side like that. Next we have the shields. So just have some glue on the brackets that we bent forward right at the beginning on the mounting. And with these, you just want to make sure you get them centrally positioned. It's the shield that reveals whether you've got the mounting lined up properly, because obviously it exaggerates any error you've got in it. Mine isn't quite straight, but it's not worth messing about with it. Chances are you'll break it off if you play with it too much. So that's okay as it is. I'm going to leave that alone. We then have to fit the barrels, which maybe I should have done a bit earlier actually, because they're quite a tight fit. Or at least the first one was. That wasn't too bad. Pontos provide these parts for the ammunition magazines, and the idea is that you have to fold this strip or roll this strip into a circle and then fold these two side pieces down, so you basically get the ammunition drum. The problem for me with that is that it's just so difficult to get this strip into a perfect circle so that it wraps around these two end pieces and just get a neat result. So I'm not even going to try that. I'm going to be using some styrene. This is styrene tube of the same diameter as these end pieces here, and then to detail the styrene I'll just cut these end pieces off and glue them to the end of the styrene, and you just get a perfect drum shape if you do it like that. Virtually impossible to get a neat result with those parts. So I think that's a much neater finish than trying to roll the brass up. Okay, so those are the two oerlikons done and ready to paint up. So they weren't too bad actually, they're very small, but they actually went together fairly well. The last thing I'm going to build is the main 4-inch gun now. I had quite a lot of flux and debris on that after soldering it. It wasn't the neatest job I've ever done. So I've just given that a degrease with some cellulose thinners. Just sprayed that through the airbrush just to make sure that all the flux, particularly because it's very greasy, make sure that all that's removed. This next part, which is really like the floor frame, just slots into the shield. There's some grooves down in the bottom, so we'll just locate that in those grooves, and I'll just run some extra thin, this is super thin CA, just run that into the joint. The lower frame's in. There are a couple of small braces that go onto the front face of the shield, which are these. I'm not really sure it's worth fitting them. They're so small and they're right at the front of the shield, so they're not really going to be that visible. I don't think it really matters if these go in. They're very tiny and they're right at the front of the shield. This is the blast bag, which obviously needs to be trimmed. There's a big moulding stub on it. I just want to check the fit of the gun barrel and blast bag against the front of the shield. So we'll just put the barrel into position. We'll fit it to the blast bag. And I'm just doing this at this stage because Pontos provide this part that goes on the front. And I just want to make sure that that's not going to obstruct the fit of the gun barrel, which it isn't. That's fine. So we can go ahead and fit this part. And then that will just fit to the front like that. Before I do glue the barrel into place, I'll just fit the vision ports. These tiny parts are just surrounds for the vision port doors. These are another part that I'm not sure that it would matter if you didn't have them on. They're fairly insignificant and I don't think they add an awful lot. But they're not too bad to fit, so I'll persevere with them. These hinges are quite a test for the eyes. And the top ones are a little bit smaller, unfortunately. This part is an awning rail which goes around the aft side of the shield. There are holes marked in the shield for the connections, but we just need to be careful not to bend this because it's very fine, as you can see. So that's the shield finished. That grab rail around the back, I think it's a grab rail or an awning rail, one of the two, was quite a difficult thing to fit. The location holes are virtually non-existent, so quite a bit of patience needed if you're going to fit that. Next we'll sort out the Revell parts that we need for the gun itself. I've just noticed that I've made an error here cutting this blast bag, because I should have left a piece of resin at the back which represents the barrel behind the blast bag. So to rectify that, rather than cut this plastic part off at the breech, I'm going to have to cut it off a bit further up the barrel so that it appears that the barrel's going into the back of the blast bag. So it's not the end of the world, but I would have been better being a bit more careful and looking at the instructions. So essentially that's how the gun will look. I think I'll actually mount the breech of the gun onto the pedestal at this stage. It'll just give a bit of a firmer fixing for the whole assembly, and it'll just make everything just that little bit more solid. So I think that's the right way to go here with this. These brackets on top of the mounting here are for the gun shield. It's the gun shield supports. So It fits inside like that. The two brackets support the roof, and the pin here, or this connection here on the front of the pedestal, goes onto that piece of brass here at the front, the little frame at the front. So that should be quite a firm fixing when we come to install it. But with a bit more detail to add to this before then, the first thing to fit is this, which is part of the elevation mechanism. And we're going to have to try and squeeze that underneath. It's maybe one of those parts that I should have fitted before putting the gun in the cradle, but I think there would have been a good chance of breaking it off if I had. Next we've got the breech. These are the sights, and there's quite a number of bends on these actually, but it's pretty obvious which way they go. I have to be careful with this now, it's getting quite fragile. Once those are solid, the glue's gone off, I'll just adjust the sights just to make sure that they're nice and straight, but I won't do it just yet. I'll probably just knock them off at the moment. And I'm assuming that this is the elevation wheel on this side of the mounting. So you can see when I come to position the gun into the mounting, you can just see that the barrel that I've left a little bit extended comes flush to the front of the shield. So the error that I made in cutting the resin off incorrectly doesn't really matter. You're not going to be able to tell that I've made that mistake. So we can glue the barrel on now. Make sure it's pointing in the right direction. So I'm going to paint this first in separate parts before I glue it together, because it'll be pretty difficult to get paint right to the front here. So they'll all be done separately, and then it'll be easy enough, I hope, to fit the mounting into its shield like that. So that's a massive improvement over the Revell parts. If I show you the shield, so this is the shield in the Revell kit, and it's completely bare. There's no detail on it at all except for the lower vision port doors. So the Pontos brass is a massive improvement over that. And it wasn't too difficult to build really in the scheme of things. There have been harder things to do on this model. So it's well worth the effort, I think, to do this gun. It's one of the big features of the ship. So it's worth spending time doing that, I think. I'll just tack that into place for some photographs, but I'll just use some acrylic glue so that it'll come apart again. As I said, I'll paint that separately, ready for the next episode of the series. Okay, so these are the guns all made up. There are actually a couple of Lewis guns to make, but I'll do those another time. These have been quite enough for this week. They've been quite demanding to make. The two oerlikons, which are entirely Pontos parts, the complete replacements for the Revell kit. This is the 2-pounder pom-pom gun, which actually was the hardest of the three, and then the main 4-inch gun here, which is a mixture of the Revell breech and pedestal with the rest in Pontos parts, and you've seen already how much better that is compared to what was provided in the Revell kit. So I'm pretty happy with those. They'll look nice on the ship, I think. So I'll put those into storage now, nice and safe, and I'll paint them when I come to do the painting of the bandstand that I made last week, and also the platform for this 4-inch gun at the front of the ship. So we'll do that all in the next episode and hopefully get these fitted. Okay, so that's the guns all assembled. Obviously we need to paint them after priming them, but I'll do the painting all together with these two platforms that I made, the bandstand here and the forward gun platform that I built a couple of episodes ago. I'll do that all together. It's not really worth loading the airbrush up just to paint the 4 guns that I've done in this episode. And hopefully at that stage I'll be able to fit the platforms and get this armament all out of the way. I think I mentioned earlier on in the video that there were a couple of Lewis guns to make, so I'll also catch up and do those as well. So that'll be coming up next week in part 16, which I'll be publishing as usual for the Corvette on Friday night at 8 o'clock, so join me for that one. If you're interested in the aircraft builds that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks, just to bring you up to speed with where I am with those, the Tamiya P51, this is the 1/48 scale P51B that's going to be done as part of the new Aces series. You can see that that's all assembled, the airframe's together. I've primed it, checked it, and it's ready for its top coats of paint now. So we'll be doing that over the next few days. The 132 scale Mosquito's coming along as well. I've been working on the cockpit over the last few days. So I hope you can join me for the Corvette build next Friday, or the Mosquito, which will be a bit before then, I think, probably Tuesday or Wednesday next week, if the rest of the cockpit build goes okay. So in the meantime, everybody, look after yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.